Greetings everyone. Thank you so much for joining me for this video. I hope that you are relieved to have the midterm exam behind you and excited for another week of research methods and statistics. So one of the requirements for pretty much any research methods or statistics course out there, whether it be in psychology or another discipline, is some kind of written assignment. And I have chosen for this particular semester for that writing assignment to be an annotated bibliography. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the very first step that you and your lab group members will go through as you start your annotated bibliography. So today I'm going to show you how to pick an interesting research question, how to create a thesis statement that attempts to answer that research question, and also how to find scholarly sources in an effort to answer your research question that you've posed. Okay, so choosing a research question. I think the best way to show you kind of how this process works is to show you some of the research questions my former students have come up with. Okay, so I had one group in my first year of teaching that looked at the phenomenon of Schadenfreude. So if you don't know, Schadenfreude is an emotional response. In particular, it's the experiencing of emotional pleasure at someone else's misfortune. So these students were interested in deciding if this pleasure at another's misfortune is a natural reaction or a learned response. Okay, another group of students looked at how caffeine affects mood, anxiety, and attention. A third group looked at the potential relationship between lighting and job production. Another group examined the relationship between self-harm and suicidal ideation in an effort to predict and prevent suicide. Okay. Another group was interested in the long-term effects of childhood abuse and maltreatment. Other folks were interested in exploring hypnotherapy as an alternative treatment for Parkinson's. And one of the things I wanted to note here is that as a 306 student, I will not actually ask you to collect any data yourself yet. Okay, so this assignment is simply to help you learn how to read research articles, how to think about potential research questions, and how to investigate them by examining the literature. But you will not actually be collecting any data in this course. Okay. So let's suppose that you have chosen your research question, right? So for example, your research question might be, how has the coronavirus pandemic impacted mental health of college students, right? Or what are some of the ways we can prevent childhood obesity, right? Or what are the consequences, both positive and negative, of increased social media exposure, right? So all of these questions are great examples because they're interesting and that they're applicable to everyday life, but they're also very complex. So there's a lot of different variables to consider, right? So what that means is there's not simply just an easy answer to come up with, right? And so that's really what you want as you go into writing your thesis statement. So as I mentioned, a thesis statement is basically your attempt to answer your research question based on evidence you've gotten from looking at the literature on whatever your topic is, right? So it's an answer to your research question, and it's going to be based on information gathered from research articles. Okay. And one other thing I want to note is it's perfectly fine if your thesis changes as you are proceeding from your initial thesis and your first sources to your annotated bibliography. Maybe you come across a really interesting article. So maybe at first you were interested in how caffeine impacts memory, but you come across a really interesting article that talks about how electroconvulsive therapy or transcranial magnetic stimulation, those are both treatments for depression, how those affect memory. So you decide, okay, I'm going to scratch my first thesis and look into how these other interventions influence memory. Or maybe as you're reading about the coronavirus pandemic, you decide you don't want to study college students, but rather look at the mental health consequences of the coronavirus on healthcare workers. Okay? This would be totally fine. Or even if you find that your thesis evolves as you require more information. Right? So maybe the first draft of your thesis is too simplistic, and there's even more variables than the ones you thought of at first, and you have to expand it. All of those things are perfectly fine. I have no expectation that when I read your annotated bibliography, your thesis has to in any way resemble the first one that you give me. If you do change it dramatically or decide you want to investigate something else, do let me know just so that I'm aware of it as I go into your annotated bibliography. But by no means am I going to take points off or be concerned with that at all. So feel free to alter your thesis statement to your liking at any point in the process. Okay, so what are some examples of thesis statements? Okay, well, let's suppose our research question is exploring some of the methods that businesses can implement to improve employee motivation. Okay, a good thesis for that might look something like setting clear expectations, sharing information in a timely fashion, and publicly offering appreciation to employees can help align individual motivation with corporate goals, right? That's beautiful. So it answers the research question with a sufficient amount of complexity, right? So it examines some of the multiple variables that influence employee motivation, okay? And it's also very clearly an evidence-based answer, presumably because you have a variety of sources that look into each of those components, right? Or you will when you write your annotated bibliography, right? So this thesis is a very strong start, if you will, to that process. Okay, finding sources. Okay, so as I mentioned, you have to have all of your sources for this assignment. So for the Lab 5 assignment, you're going to turn in a sheet of paper to me, and you're welcome to work individually or on your own, or if you would prefer to collaborate with your lab partners, you can do that as well. So what you're going to turn into me as a group or individually is a sheet of paper, a Microsoft Word document with your research question, your thesis statement, and an APA formatted list, including at least 5 journal articles or published research articles. Okay, so you are not allowed to include things like books, dissertations, websites, anything like that. So you need to focus your search to published journal articles that are written by scientists for scientists, or written by psychologists for psychologists. Okay, so you need published journal articles. Okay, so where can you go to find published research articles? Well, the best place to start is at the Mercer Library, and you don't even have to go to the library for this. Fortunately, Mercer has a variety of online databases that include published research articles in psychology. So those databases are Psycinfo and Psycarticles, and I'll show you in this video and in my next video how to access those. And then you can also use one of Google's websites called Google Scholar. And there's also other websites available where scientists publish their own research articles or make their own research articles available to the public. So those websites are ResearchGate and Academiaedu. Okay, so I'll show you these 5 different areas where you can find your published research articles, right? But just to reiterate, you need published research articles, not books, dissertations, blogs, or websites. I realize this might sound silly to those of you who have already done literature searches like this, but just a couple of pointers for those of you who might be new to this. How do you know if something is a journal article or a published research article? Well, one of the dead giveaways of a published research article is you're almost always going to have to download it as a PDF. Okay, there are some websites that allow you to access the entire article just via a web browser. Like Science Direct, for example, has a lot of articles available that just kind of pop up. But almost always, research articles are going to require you to download a PDF. Obviously, they're also going to have a title at the top of them. So they might say Journal of Social Psychology, or Journal of Infographics, or Journal of Computational Processing, right? Journal of Psychiatry, things like that. So there should literally be a title of a journal followed by a volume number and an item number. Okay, so these are things that you're looking for. So it's an actual document that you download, and it should say the name of the journal right at the top for you. Okay. Okay, so like I said, the best place to start, particularly for those of you who have not done a formal literature search before, is to start at the Mercer Library. So I created this particular screenshot a couple of years ago, but I believe this view is still accurate. So if you simply Google Mercer Library, okay, you'll come up with Mercer University Libraries, the link, and then you should be able to click on databases by subject. And don't worry, like I said, my next video is going to be a Zoom video where I kind of do this live for you. But this should hopefully get you started. So you're going to click on the Mercer Library databases by subject. Okay, and once you do that, you should see all of Mercer's available online databases by subject, and just click on psychology. Okay, and that will take you to Psycinfo, which is our first database. Okay, and once you get onto Psycinfo, there's going to be this rather complex viewing screen. So the easiest way to search is to do a keyword search. So let's suppose that you are interested in whether people who have narcissistic personality disorder are more prone to aggression or violence. Okay, one of the things you can do quite easily is just enter those keywords into Psycinfo. Okay, and the great thing about Psycinfo is you can look for articles with the keyword narcissist and also aggression or violence. All you have to do is use that pull down menu and select and, okay, and they'll search for articles with those 3 keywords in them, okay. You can also use the thesaurus option to search for other relevant subject terms or related subject terms. The one limitation of Psycinfo is some of the articles will not be directly available. So for example, if the library does not have that article, you will have to do something like an interlibrary loan. But fortunately, there are wonderful folks at the library that work very hard to process those requests. So unless you're trying to find kind of a niche article that was published a long time ago in the 1920s or something, you should be able to access those files fairly quickly after requesting them. Okay. One thing I forgot to mention is Psycinfo. In addition to Psycinfo, there's also a database called Psycarticles. And Psycarticles is essentially the exact same thing, except Psycarticles is limited to publications that have direct access to the PDFs. So if you don't want to mess with like interlibrary loans or finding articles from other search options, I'd recommend going right to Psycarticles because they have the PDFs of the article linked directly for you in that database. You will probably find more sources in Psycinfo because they're not limited to those that have direct access PDFs. But it certainly is a more convenient option to go with Psycarticles. So something else you can do is go to Google Scholar. So Google Scholar, you would get there just by typing in scholar.google.com into your browser. And here again, you could do a simple Google search. So you could type in aggression there. Okay, and you'll get quite a few sources, right? So you have, for example, aggression, a social learning analysis. But again, this is a book, so I would like to restrict you guys to specific research articles. So it looks like the one beneath it, the psychology of aggression, is a research article. So that would be appropriate. And again, you can tell because there's the word abstract there, okay? So that's another dead giveaway that it's a scientific article rather than a book, is if it has an abstract, right? So what else can you do within Google Scholar? Well, you can also do a more elaborate Google Scholar search. So for example, you can look at organized crime, drug violence, and gang membership kind of all together. But you can, there are a variety of search links that you can also use. So, for example, if you see an article, you can click on the authors of that article and go to their web pages, because chances are if they've written one article on crime and drug violence and gangs, they've probably written a lot more research articles within that same subject matter or that same area of research. So doing an author search is a great way to get more articles if you're looking for them. You can also go to, you can click on Cited By, and that will give you articles again. So if a given article cites this article, it means it's probably looking at a subject area that's very similar. And another thing you can do is if Google has access to the PDF, if it's publicly available, then you can click on the PDF link and it'll take you straight to the article for you to download. And the last thing is you can limit your Google Scholar search to a particular time period, right? So for example, if you are interested in the coronavirus pandemic and how it influences mental health, then maybe you want to restrict your search to 2019 or later, because that's when the COVID-19 pandemic began. Okay, so this is just another view of Google Scholar. So this is an example of an author search. So if you click on the author link, you will be able to access all of the articles that individual has written, which is a nice feature. Again, if you're looking for multiple articles about the same topic, it's very likely that a given author, if they're studying a particular area, they've probably written multiple articles about it. Okay, another option is a website called ResearchGate.net, where scientists can go to publish their research. So, for example, I have a profile on ResearchGate. I need to update this screenshot, but that's me. And you can access all of my publications. There have been more since then, but they're all available to the public. Similarly, there's a website called Academiaedu, where you can access people's articles that they've made public. So how you would do that is simply to do an author search, right? So for example, let's say that you find a particular scientist that has written multiple articles in the domain you're interested in or the particular research question that you have, but you're not able to locate an article in Psycinfo, Psycarticles, or Google Scholar. You could always try Academiaedu or ResearchGate and simply type in that author's name to see if they've made their research articles publicly available on either of these websites. Okay. So the last thing I wanted to chat about in this video is citing sources, right? Because as I mentioned, one of the things I'm going to require you guys to do, right, is at the top you'll have your research question, then your thesis statement, then the third and final thing will be a list of APA formatted references, right? So you'll have to have at least 5 journal articles that you are basically creating a reference page for. So you've already completed the APA tutorial in this course for our last lab. So you should be familiar with how to cite a journal article in APA style from learning about the 7th edition. But I just wanted to review it carefully with you and talk about some of the common mistakes that students make. Okay, so this is an example of how to cite a journal article, a published research article in APA style. Okay, so what I would very, very strongly suggest you do is make sure you pay attention to this slide, okay, and that you use this particular example as your reference and write your own references. Okay, so even if you have, five different articles and it takes you more time than it would be to, example, use a program that generates a citation for you, I would encourage you to do it yourself using this as your example, because oftentimes the programs that generate citations or references for you, the formatting is completely incorrect. Okay, and I will be taking points off if your APA style reference is incorrect. Okay, so I will do this in my next video about your annotated bibliography as well. But let's go through each component of an APA style reference for a journal article real quick. Okay, and another thing I wanted to mention is that APA is very, very different than MLA. So if you're used to MLA, you'll want to pay particular attention, because there's lots of stuff that is encouraged in MLA that is not encouraged with APA. Okay, so whenever you create an APA style reference, you're going to start with the author and the year of publication. Okay, so when you cite the author in your reference, okay, you're going to do the author's last name followed by a comma and their first initial. If there's another author, then you would include a comma after the period and include the second author's last name followed by a comma and their first initial. Okay. Then, when you're done citing all of the authors, you're going to include the year of publication in parentheses followed by a period. Okay. Next comes the article title. So unlike with MLA, whenever you cite in your reference the title of the article, you're not going to use title case. Okay, so with title case, every single word in the title is capitalized. With an APA style reference, the first letter of the title is capitalized, and if you have a colon inserted into the title, the letter following the colon or the word following the colon is going to be capitalized, right? So we have capital T followed by colon, capital hydration, and then and other health benefits is in lowercase followed by a period. Okay, then next you have the journal title. Okay, and the journal title is always in italics. Okay, so primary health care, okay, is in italics, followed by a comma, and then you're also going to italicize the volume number, which is 26 in this case. And then immediately after the volume number, without a space in between, is going to be the issue number, which is in parentheses but not italicized. Okay, and then you're going to again have a comma and the pages of the article. Right? And all of this should jump right out to you on the first page of the article. You'll be able to see the number of pages. Okay, so again, no italics, but you're going to have another period there. And then you're going to include the DOI. So the DOI is kind of like a social security number for the article so that people can access it very quickly simply by inputting that number into their web browser. And that should again be something that is included on the first page of the article that you open. There are some cases with older articles where they may not have a DOI number. If you do have difficulty locating it, please feel free to email me and I'll look into it for you and we can both kind of see if we can find it. So make sure that you look very carefully at this example and use it as a resource as well as your APA tutorial rather than attempting to use Google or even Psycinfo. APA has a site tool and I would encourage you not to use either of them because they've gotten more reliable over the years, but they still aren't perfect. And even if it takes you a little more time initially, you'll eventually get used to this format and be able to generate it yourself, which is the idea. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to mention is the due date for your Lab 5 assignment, which is your topic, thesis statement, and 5 sources, and that's going to be due Friday, March 5th at 11:59 p.m. Okay, and again, what I would like is your research question at the top, followed by your thesis statement, followed by your list of 5 sources, which will be APA formatted like a reference page that you would include at the end of a research paper. Okay, so if y'all have any questions, feel free to reach out, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video.